Welcome to the EarthWorks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. This is Joel Simmons, and I am very excited to start the new year with one of my dearest friends who I've known for longer than we want to share with anybody, Mr. Dave Wilber. And I think everybody knows Dave that listens to and watches the podcast. I probably shouldn't tell you this, Dave, but you are still to this day one of our most listened to podcasts. So
really,
yeah. So our team has been asking for you to be back on a regular basis, and now we have something really cool to talk about, and I'm thrilled. And
well, I'm glad that my hacking skills have the bots running,
yes.
so that it looks like they call that view botting.
I know. Jack Higgins does that a lot with everything too. His family watches it all to make him look good. But you and I go back a long time, my friend. I mean, you introduced me. I've been saying this recently a lot. You're probably ears have been burning because I've been talking a lot about you. But I was out at Acres USA with Kevin Hicks, who you know well, who you introduced me to, who has been with us now on the team for a number of years.
Yeah, right.
And I said this to a couple of folks just recently. You took me when I was a very young EarthWorksian out to Phoenix. And it was interesting because I don't even know if I had a salary when you and I first met. I'm not even sure how we met, to be honest with you.
You're just getting started, yeah.
But you took me out to that little pocket of people. Kevin Hicks was there at Desert Forest. There was a whole bunch of guys, and you introduced me to Ed Miller. And I was one of these, dumber than a rock kind of young guys, green as could be. And it was the first place in the country that I ever found a pocket of people that spoke the Jerry Bernetti and Acres USA talk of base saturation and all the stuff that our friend Travis tells us is a bunch of crap, which we know we've lived and died by from. I have to throw Travis out there every once in a while.
Sure, why not?
Because it's so absurd. But yeah, you were the first one to introduce me to this group of guys, and of course Kevin. This is what I want to say 92, 90, early 90s.
94.
Was it that early?
As far as I remember, 94. I was thinking about that this morning. It was 1994. Yeah,
so we go out to we go out to the desert, and here's these guys that are building soils.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind. I mean, it's just like I think it was that trip that I realized that I think I might have something going here. If this little EarthWorks project of mine can really get off the ground, maybe I got something working here. And 37 years or whatever the hell it is, we're still standing.
I'm not good at math, but I mean I'm good at math, but just not in this moment. How about that? Not enough coffee.
Struggle. But I owe you a debt of gratitude for a lot of things. That was one of them, introducing me to that crew and to Kevin, and and just to really reinforce. We talk a lot about Jerry Bernetti. You got to know Jerry. Jerry, teached all of this and taught me all of this. But I never really saw it in practice until I really got out to the desert with you and listen to you talking about it. Of course, your background at the time was Brookside Labs, and Brookside has always been doing, this business model. And but to see it live was so cool to me. It was the coolest thing. I mean, I remember coming home saying, "Wow, this might work. This is really cool. People are actually doing this." I'm like all jazzed up and 16 cups of coffee in me. It was kind of cool.
Well, I that group of people in North Scottsdale at the time, and it was kind of before North Scottsdale was really booming like it is now. They were all up there, at some pretty high-end properties, just kind of killing it themselves, and being their own community almost.
Yeah.
And we met all of them.
We did.
And I was really fortunate to be working with those guys, and a few of them said to me, "Dave, there's nothing we can do with soils in the desert." And that was my big challenge.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, really? You think so? Well, let me show you a couple of tricks. And then not really tricks, but let me just show you this version of agronomy. And then you tell me if it works or not, because I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Right. So give me your worst green and your worst fairway, and let's do some soil sampling. And then, will you follow a couple of suggestions that I have, recommendations, whatever, and then tell me what happens? Yeah. That's kind of how I approach that. And I was just coming off of being a superintendent, and I had, you know, I had, oh, I don't know, built one golf course and renovated two. And we were, we were doing all these things, right? We were doing all this Amish turf grass farming.
Right.
And,
Good way to say it.
that's how I met Dick Vasala. That's how I got involved with Brookside Labs. I mean, it was basically, I went looking for people that thought that way.
Yeah.
And applied that stuff as a superintendent. And I got teased mercilessly, by the mainstream, which motivated me more, right?
Yes.
So I got motivated.
I have the
by
same
that.
reflection.
Yeah. And then I got motivated by, by people saying, hey, these are desert soils. You can't do anything with them here. And it's like, listen, soils are soils, grass is grass. Like, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
Right. I kind of said it, but you can't say that to a super successful superintendent. I mean, you can't say that to somebody who's on a really high end, Ed Miller's at Desert Highlands and the place is cracking.
Stunning.
Right. And it's like, it's really, you have to really step carefully. And I'm glad I was a superintendent because I knew where to stop and where to start by saying to somebody, here's some things you can change.
Yeah.
And then if there was some pushback, is it a worthy discussion? How are you going to have that discussion? And I'd like to say that we had some real influence, particularly in the Western United States, getting going.
Oh, there's no question.
And I had my pockets of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You brought up an interesting point because I've been battling this my whole career. But, you get to a guy, like an Ed Miller or a Kevin Hicks. These guys are great golf course superintendents. They know how to grow grass. And so how do you go in there and try to suggest there's a different way? And, it may not be that, they're going to have better grass, but it's going to be easier to get to where they are.
Yeah. My perspective on this now, I don't think I could articulate it back then, Joel, but I can articulate it now, is that essentially what I was doing was selling minimalism.
Yeah, exactly.
And what we were saying, what we were saying is, listen, I'd like you to be able to do less and get the same or better results.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm doing that as a business owner, and I'm selling fertilizers, and I'm trying to say, you don't need less. Much. You do less.
Do less. And I think
Kevin says, just do the right less.
And there are golf course superintendents, and I've learned this over the years, right? After 30 some years of consulting or whatever, and 40 some years in the business, there are supers that are going to roll up the door and they just want to send everything they've got out there to go to war.
Yeah.
Right. Every tool they have, everything.
And that's what they were taught, to be honest with you. That's
exactly.
That's the lesson taught.
There's nothing wrong with that,
No.
But I was working with some people, especially in the beginning, who were just coming up or just getting started in some situations where they had to produce, and there wasn't any. It's not that there were budget constraints and stuff, but there was no time.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, how do I sell minimalism against the clock?
Right. Exactly. How do you sell them time?
And so the way I circled around that one, the way I circled the wagons on that one is I just said, listen, there's a ton of things for you to be focusing on. This shouldn't be one of them.
Yeah.
This should be easy. This should settle into an easy groove.
Yeah.
So that you can manage your people, so that you can manage your members, so that you can, go for the, tournament schedule, all those sorts of things. I want your fertility work to be easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of balls in the air. Don't juggle another.
Yeah.
tournament.
Don't make this one one of the balls that doesn't need to be juggled as much.
Yeah.
Pick it up every once in a while, but don't have it in your don't have this plate spinning and keep running too.
Right. Yeah. Because it'll drop. You'll drop it and that could crash the whole system,
Yeah. And then the other thing was not swinging any high pitches. And so, a lot of my calls, especially early on, were, God, Dave, this happened. And I don't know what to do. Right. My grass turned whatever color or, or something. And we were fighting a lot of different irrigation water and, different effects from some really chromy waters in the Western US and all that. And so there was a lot of conversation about, what do we do? What's an emergency and what isn't? And then please don't swing it at any high pitches here that you're not going to be able to hit. Like swing at strikes, be choosy here about what you're doing. And and that was, that was hard
It
because again,
resonated.
huh?
It resonated.
It resonated, but superintendents and me kind of included as a young super, it's like, man, I can hit anything. Throw any ball at me you want, and I'm going to hit it out of the park. That's just me, right? I'm going to take a swing at curveball, slider, you name it. I got the bat. And it's like, sometimes you got to step back and just let some stuff happen. That's nature. Because nature eventually is going to strike you out.
That's the hardest lesson to teach a young superintendent.
It is. It is.
Absolutely.
And it took me years to be able to articulate minimalism, to articulate, nature wins no matter what.
Nature always wins, right?
Yeah.
Just let her do her job. Just let her be there. Just let her be a part of the team,
Yeah, and observe and stuff. And it goes back to something that Dr. Albrecht used to say, which is like, read books, right? That's fine, but study nature.
Yeah.
We when we study books and not study nature, we're in trouble. Read the books. That's great. But you got to study and be an observer. And so many times I was asking the superintendent, what do you see? What's happened? You did this. What was the result? Those kinds of things. And now we're finding out that, that a lot of, now we're getting better at data collection and quantifying, those things. Yeah.
And that's not an easy thing when you're dealing with Mother Nature, because she's very dynamic, but when
what do I look at?
When you can quantify some of the basic steps, because it's a moving target all the time with Mother Nature, but there's definitely some statistical stuff and there's definitely some observation. And like you said, and Jerry taught me this from day one, just watch Mother Nature, what she does.
Yeah. Yeah. Jerry was the master at watching and results.
He read, but he also then took what he would read and put that into observation. And if it didn't jive, then he goes, I don't think that works. It was pretty cool. Let's talk about what you're doing now, because I think it's exciting. I'm happy for you. We love talking technology on the podcast. And I'm just so thrilled that you've gotten hooked up with the TurfRad folks. And for those people that don't know TurfRad, I'm going to let you introduce it. But I think it's fascinating technology, and I think it could really be a game changer. And your passion for water and all that stuff. When I heard that you were jumping on this, I'm thinking this is absolutely the perfect place for Dave Wilber to be, hanging his hat for a while. I think it's great. So tell us, first of all, what is it? And what do we expect from it?
Joel, going back a little bit, I mean, I was pretty much kind of semi-retired.
I know.
I
would call you every once in a while trying to get you on. We had you on the podcast a handful of times, but
I had a handful
of waste, my friend, a waste of your talent.
I had a handful of consulting clients, and I was doing some work with the local school district here and work in my community. And, I'd been on the road for so long that I didn't know what community was,
That's great. That's wonderful.
And now I understand what community is a lot more, and I'm community minded and, those sorts of things. And I was working with kids and
we had you on a podcast talking about the whole bus,
driving a bus, working with at-risk kids. And I'd never had that chance to do that. I never got to be a parent because I was too busy working.
Yeah.
And, so I developed this persona, Mr. Bear, right? Mr. Bear was going to
remember Mr. Bear.
There were so many bus drivers named Dave that they made me pick a name. And I said, well, people nickname me Bear sometimes. So, okay, but you're a bear. That's what you'll be. You'll be Mr. Bear. And I had a really great time with all that. But there was always that string, the turfgrass pull.
Of course, it's a passion.
And every time my friends called or any of my, my remaining clients called, and we would have a 2-hour turfgrass discussion, or I'd get on a podcast with you guys, and I would come off of that and I would go, God, I should be working in this. Like, I still love it, and I still know the business. I know who's who, and, I keep up, right, with that kind of stuff. I still, my Twitter account, I say it's Turf Twitter, right? And I just couldn't let go. And so I was looking at some other business opportunities, and I invested in, a couple of small things that have turned out to be okay, and really wanted to simplify my life. Minimalism.
I love it.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I have a small home, I have a small situation, I have my animals, it's very, very comfortable kind of thing. And then I get a phone call from a friend who says, I want to introduce you to the TurfRad guys. And I had heard about TurfRad, and I was like, oh man, I like what those guys are doing.
Yeah.
The whole idea of moisture, but I didn't understand the technology or anything. So I ended up speaking with Derek House, who's the PhD, who's, an astrophysicist, right? And the founder of TurfRad. And I knew that they had been working with this with, a few PGA Tour stops, and that there were a few clients scattered around the country. I knew that they were working with the task tracker people here in the States. And, I knew little bits and pieces, but I didn't really understand the tech, right?
Yeah.
So I started asking the questions, and I get the full rundown, the full-on geek rundown, and I'm like, God, this is brilliant. I mean, so you're telling me this sensor, can read moisture to 4 inches, no matter what the terrain is like. It's just going to go over it. And understanding L-band microwave, understanding that the microwave hits, and there's it's a one-way communications at a certain
That's
frequency.
the technology, is L-band microwave.
L-band microwave. So essentially, just like microwave penetrates my food in the microwave,
Yeah.
it's a similar sort of situation, and it's on a very narrow frequency. And essentially what it is the sensor is the very same sensor that is on a satellite way up there, but that satellite can measure moisture on a 25 square kilometer basis, right?
Wow.
So if you bring the sensor down closer to Earth, then it can, then it has a resolution of like a meter.
Yeah.
Soon to be, when RTK corrections come in, all that sort of stuff, soon to be centimeter grade. And so I'm listening to this, and then they're showing me the mapping that goes with it, because mapping is a big part of this. So the sensor essentially is measuring 7 readings a second as it goes along. And so like a typical fairway might have 10,000 readings on it. So as soon as Derek Houtz said that to me, I just stopped him and I said, wait a minute. So I have let me just I need to understand this in my turf head brain.
Right.
So I love the TDR. We've been working with TDRs. And so you're telling me that this thing can essentially give me a TDR reading 10,000 times on
every
a fairway.
what? Every couple of inches, essentially, on a fairway?
Yeah.
I mean, is that essentially what we're looking at? Every
7 readings a second. So think about a mower going along at mower speed. Every second, it's going to take 7 readings, and all this is flowing into, the software that converts it to mapping. Right.
Well, let's go back just a second, Dave, so everybody understands the value of TurfRad. This is a mounted piece of equipment on the mower, on the front of the mower.
On the front of a mower, you can mount it on a utility vehicle and drive along. It doesn't matter what.
You can mount it on anything. But you got the mowers out there every day anyway. That seems to be the common practice, is they put it on.
And for the guys that don't mow every day, they can throw it on a utility vehicle and
perfect. Just drive
and just go drive. Yeah. And so the sensor is out collecting data, and then once it gets to the shop, it connects to the Wi-Fi, and the data goes up into our cloud and into our processing, TurfRad's processing. And this gets processed into moisture readings and flows
so you're not
into
installing
mapping.
Moisture meters onto the property all over the place. You're just basically driving over the property with this, with this L-band microwave process over top the soil. How deep are we getting? How deep can we
4
see
inches?
So we can see moisture 4 inches deep.
4 inches deep.
And the real value is you're really kind of monitoring skips or misses, or where irrigation, whatever. I mean, areas that are just need to be monitored.
You can decide, and there's some calibration that goes on, right? Which we calibrate against the TDR. There's some work that goes on with that just to get that straight. And then, so let's say that you have a pressure problem or a jacked up nozzle or a head that's, all that sort of thing. It's going to show it to you right away.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that map can be printed. It can be handed to a guy who's going to go on a hand water, and it's like, water the red spots.
Oh, wow.
Don't water the blue spots.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So the map is, that way. So
you're not overwatering, and you're not, you're hitting the spots that aren't getting.
And then if I'm sitting and I'm making adjustments on my irrigation system, okay, I've gone too far up on that approach. Let's back that off a little bit. Much better stuff, right? So now, the TDR and greens, and we're working on a greens only kind of solution right now, which is going to be very similar, but it's small. It's this big.
A mounted system again?
Yeah, it can be mounted, or it can be put on a roller,
Oh,
or
okay.
just
So, yeah.
pushed on a spray hawk kind of thing, or
Yeah.
we're even thinking of a little robot,
Oh,
you know,
wow. That would be
like
very
a green Zumba. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Just set the thing down and let it just go
Moisture
around. And
Zumba.
moisture Zumba.
I
So
like
yeah,
that.
it's oversimplified. The tech guys at TurfRad and TerraRad Tech could probably, you know, shoot me for saying it that way, but that's what I've been talking to them about. You know,
Yeah. No, I think that, I mean, it sounds like it's almost an endless capability here. I mean,
well, the
potentially.
technology comes,
Yeah.
Joel, from it. It started Derek and Lars Horvath, the CTO, and those guys. They started by measuring polar ice caps and
You were telling me
glaciers
that. That's fascinating.
and that sort of thing, mounted on a big drone, you know, or on a snowcat. You know, I've got pictures of the very almost the very same sensor that we use on turf grass, you know, on these snowcat kind of things, and they just drive along and measure the depth of the or the moisture percentage in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
ice, and it tells you a lot about what's going on with the polar cap.
Yeah.
So, and then similarly, road construction, that same sensor can be used to measure moisture and differences in compaction. Because essentially, when we do compaction testing on a constructed road, we're looking at moisture.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Because obviously the more compaction, the less moisture you're going to have.
there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That makes
So
sense.
it's just a different
Yeah.
software. It's just a different API,
Right. Right.
but it's the same idea. But they can mount this sensor on a pickup truck and just drive along. And instead of having a guy go along and do those, I don't know if you've ever seen those moisture measurement things, but they,
Yeah.
you know, they just, here's a guy all by himself, you know, doing 2 miles of road,
Right.
you know, it takes forever. Right.
With a stick.
So
Yeah.
the other thing that a similar application can do is like on a big building, on a skyscraper, you can, you know, there's an aggregate layer on top of a flat roof skyscraper. Right.
Yeah.
And then below that is a bunch of insulation. And so you can move the sensor over that aggregate and it can see through to see if there's moisture in the insulation. In other words, if there's a roof leak.
If there's something leaking. Yeah. There you
If
go.
there's a roof leak and the insulation's wet, that's the first thing that aggregate layer has failed.
And that's essentially the same sensor as what
It's the
we're talking
same,
with
it's the
TurfRad.
same thing, just a different way to do the software, but it's all, that's what L-band microwave can do
Yeah.
in all those situations. So in a turfgrass application, it's kind of easy, you know, and it's funny to hear the rocket scientists talk because they go, the turf thing's easy. Like, this is fun. This is easy.
Yeah.
They like it. They think it's fun. And they love golf course superintendents, and they love, you know, we've had a real great bunch of early adopters, you know, guys like John Riley and
Yeah.
Jim
He's been on the
Pavati.
podcast.
Yeah. Right. You know what I'm saying? So they love it. And it's
Yeah.
just good data collection. And, you know, there's some fine tuning that's had to happen and some, you know, some stuff like right now we're working with different mounting solutions and,
Yeah.
you know, because these guys aren't turf guys, right?
Right,
They're
right.
rocket scientists. So they're,
Yeah.
you know, they're learning. And that's kind of what my role is to be the turf translator.
So in that
And,
light, where do you mount it on the mower? I mean, you got to
you can
be able
mount
to
it
get
anywhere.
I mean,
on the
but
back.
you got to get direct access to the soil. You can't have
Yeah,
it.
it's got to have, there can't be anything in front of, you know,
Right.
the sensor.
Okay.
It's got to be at a certain angle, and essentially the microwave is bouncing, you know,
Right. So most guys would mount it to the back of the mower.
to the back of the mower.
Yeah.
Yeah, or to the back or to the side of a utility vehicle,
Okay.
or
Well, that makes sense.
or out in front, as long as it's facing far enough front and there's nothing in
Right.
the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Utility vehicle, you probably do that, couldn't you?
Yeah, you know, we had a guy who put one on the back of his utility vehicle, and then he hooked up a buffalo blower one day and went out, and the sensor was just seeing the buffalo blower that didn't work.
Right. It's just this
You know,
wind.
kind of stuff.
Yeah. That makes
And
sense.
so, you know, as opposed to NVID, which is the other kind of technology that, you know, that measures moisture, all that's doing really is just it's near infrared of just the surface. It's not really, it's a surface temperature thing, not really as much moisture. It can be correlated that way. This is looking into the soil. So that's
Yeah.
the difference between L-band and NVID.
Can you get temperature?
Yeah, it's temperature is part of the equation.
Okay.
We don't throw that out there because it's an infrared temperature thing. It's just
I
taking
see.
the,
Gotcha.
yeah, and you can't get salinity from it. It's a moisture sensor. You know,
Oh,
so
you
that's
can
one
get
thing.
salinity. So
You
you can.
cannot
Oh,
You
you
cannot
cannot
get
get, I was going
soil.
to say, because it's only moisture. So, but still that, I mean, the significance of that is astronomical to know
Oh yeah.
where your dry spots are and where your wet spots are, you know?
Well, it's we think a lot of times in the turf business, and I've been talking about this for years. And again, because I cut my teeth in the Western U.S. where water can be really precious. You know, we're
Yeah.
talking about the
Horrible.
desert and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then places where water quality really sucks. You know, the way to overcome bad water quality is don't use water.
Right.
All right.
That's a good
You know?
solution. Yeah.
Yeah.
This stuff sucks. Don't drink it. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't irrigate with this. And
Yeah.
you know, and so we've had to teach people things like, you know, spritzing, you know, syringing, which seems like a good concept, but with your water, all that is a salt application. Don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So what's the choice?
Well, they just, if you water, you got to water deeper. You know,
Yeah.
you have to have a leaching fraction involved. You don't
You've
want to go
always
out.
taught me deep and infrequent. So you're still,
I've It's funny that that's become a this or that, you know, because
yeah.
deep and infrequent work has worked in so many ways, again, where we have crappy water and we have evaporative cooling potential and all that sort of stuff. That doesn't necessarily happen in all places. And so places where humidity is different and all that,
East Coast
that would
guys
change that
tend
thing.
to be a little bit different in their thinking.
East Coast, Mid-Atlantic, different
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know that. I just, again, I spent, you know, so much time in desert environments, Middle East and Mediterranean environments, things like that. You know, that's where we've been talking about all this. So moisture management is just,
Yeah.
it's just fun for me.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
Dave,
fun.
tell me the story. Tell us the story. I love this story of yours. And I remember vividly when you first told it to me, you had a client that was out, you were trying to basically teach him deep and infrequent. You had him out watering, and he's on the phone with you, basically panicking. And you just said, just hold on. And then all of a sudden, whoosh.
Well, I don't want to, let's see. I'm going to be careful. I don't want to say any names.
You don't need to name a name. I just think the story is great.
But let's talk about a very high profile place on the West Coast you know, in California.
Yeah.
And the superintendent's talking to me about how they, you know, they turn on their sprinkler heads for 1 or 2 minutes and the water's running off the green, right? And it's a busy place and they can't really go out and air fly all the time. And it's like, you know, and I said, well, I'm going to teach you something, right? We're going to learn to use the soil profile and the adhesion cohesion effects of soil, right? And pore space and all that. So yeah, when you're only engaging the top half an inch of your pore space, this is what's going to happen. So what can we do, right? So basically I coached this superintendent into going out to his kind of worst green, the one that was puddling the most, and turning on all his sprinklers and walking away.
Which had to be just incredibly nerve-wracking.
And he calls me, you know, 6 minutes into this thing and says, you're crazy. You're effing crazy, Wilber. The water's running off this thing. And I'm like, listen, just go away. Go to the shop and drink a beer.
Yeah, right.
Something, you know, just go away from there for a while. Give it, you know, and we had done the calculations, right? Because there's an easy way to calculate how much pore space. So we knew his soils and we knew what was supposed to happen, right? Yeah. And I said, you know, just get out of there for half an hour. Don't stand there and watch this because it's just going to make you crazy. He says, my golf course not going to be able to play in the morning. Like we have to play golf tomorrow, Dave. You know, like at a very high end.
Yeah.
Kind of deal.
Lots of people will be here.
And and my bunkers and, you know, he's just freaking out, right? And of course, you know, we learned that sometimes we have to get part circle heads involved and things like that. But so he goes away for half hour, 45 minutes, and I get the call. I'm like, call me in 45 minutes, you know, and go back out. And the guy's out there and he goes, I don't understand. There's no puddles. Water's running
on the
full
surface.
bore and there's no surface puddles.
Yeah.
Explain this to me. What's going on, you know? And, you know, you're talking about sand-based greens, right? They're supposed to drain.
Yeah.
And this particular green, that one that we were really talking about, had been rebuilt to USJ specs. So all of a sudden it's taking water. All of a sudden the whole area is taking water, right? And then again, we had done the calculations, so we knew how many gallons we wanted to apply. And I said, okay, you've got another, in this particular case, I think it was about an hour of water that we're going to put on there.
You were on there with water for over an hour?
An hour.
An hour.
In this particular situation, right?
Yeah. Based
And
on the calculations of what you knew was going to happen.
I bet the drain tiles on this green had never seen water. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's the other thing is, we had figured out where the drain tiles were. We had made sure they were all working.
Yeah.
And so he calls me again, and he's out by where the drain tile is exiting. And he says, "There's water flowing out of this. It's flowing like crazy. And there's no puddles." And I'm like, "Good, we're good. Shut off the water.
Yeah.
Good to go."
Well,
what's this going to be like in the morning? And I said, "I can't wait till you call me in the morning."
Yeah. What was it like?
5:30 a.m. I get the phone call. He's out there in the dark, right? Because this guy didn't sleep.
No, of course not. He's panicked.
He didn't sleep.
I would have been too.
He's out there 5:30 in the morning with the lights, and he says, "This is the best green on the golf course. This is the driest green on the golf course."
Yeah, and firmest.
Everything, yeah, firmest. Like everything. He says everything else is kind of squishy and kind of that POA thing, you know. And he goes, "This is like kind of firm." And he says, "There's a little bit of water out in the approach. We're going to squeegee this off a little bit because it kind of ran down the hill." And he goes, "Dude, I don't even understand." And I said, "Well,
explain the science."
So here's the cool part. That green didn't need to get watered for a week.
Right.
And they've been watering watering that thing every day.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay." So then I had to come and give the chalk talk and, get the assistants together and sit there and draw on the whiteboard and explain, that water moves down and out at the same rate, and that hydraulic conductivity and hydraulic pressure and infiltration and percolation are two different things, and just go through the whole physics of it all.
Yeah.
And and that's the way for years, Joel, that I taught people to water a USGA type green in the Western US when you had, that type situation when the water was running off and you couldn't do anything. Now we have way better venting tools.
Yeah.
We have way better ways to break up the surface and to help with that, right? And get some gas and all that sort of stuff in. But it's essentially just like putting your finger on the straw, once you let off it, and the air comes in behind it.
You gave me an aha moment when I heard that story for the first time. I think it might have actually been with the super, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's what happened." It's like, wow, that just blows my mind. I mean, I was naive to it all. It was kind of fascinating. I've seen it 100 times since then, but
Ed Miller got up and gave a talk at the USGA, at the USGA meetings at the national, the GIS or whatever we were calling, but in 1992, after the US Open. I guess it was before. It was when he was at Desert Forest, so it was before he went to Pebble Beach, and he talked about how he was watering the greens at Desert Forest and Scottsdale once a week. Once a week,
which is unbelievable.
And I'm sitting there, as a young superintendent, right, listening to this. I'm there with my coat and tie on because that's what you do, and and here's Ed Miller talking, and I knew Ed had worked for Armin Sunni and been at Cherry Hills. Now he's at his first really big Desert Forest, pretty cool place, right? And he's in Arizona, and he's talking about watering once a week, and then he's talking about evaporative cooling and all that stuff. And I'm like, I got to figure this out.
And there's eyes rolling in the back of their heads.
I got to figure this out. And I didn't know anything about water quality and all that sort of stuff. So my golf course in Denver, way overplayed, didn't have a chance to do all that sort of stuff. So we started this deep water kind of thing, and based on just kind of what I had seen Ed talk about. I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Right.
But I did know that we were dragging way less hose. And that's what made a difference to me.
What was this? Okay. I mean, you're talking, is this effective on any soil types? I mean, you mentioned sand greens. Can you do it on a push-up?
Yeah.
Same physics, basically, right?
You just have to understand. And most push-up greens have got a top dressing layer there and, and other things, right? So, you may need to do some fracturing and some stuff beforehand to.
What does thatch have to do with it? Does it affect it?
Sure, absolutely. You got to get the water pulling past the thatch.
Yeah. So that just adds more water to the process.
Yeah,
because you got to saturate that and then let it release.
Yeah. So it's tougher in in some push-up situations, but not always. And it's not for everybody. It's not for every situation, but in so many situations, it is a godsend. Yeah, because you just can't keep the place from burning up. And again, if you have some water that's that's a little substandard, and you're out there spritzing with it, all you're doing is just putting sizzle to the, you're just putting osmotic pressure in that plant that it can't overcome.
Yeah, exactly.
right?
You're just talking physics, forget the chemistry involved,
Yeah, the chemistry
you
is
know, but
the completely other part. And
yeah,
so yeah, I getting back to the TurfRad thing, I love water. I love everything to do with water management, moisture management, irrigation, all those sorts of things. And we've always said that there are so many people that are in tougher irrigation systems. They live by their irrigation system more than they do their spray rig. Whether that's an East Coast, West Coast thing, I don't
yeah,
know. I guess you could say
a
that.
little bit.
Um, but I've also worked in other parts of the world where you could go, Hawaii, you can go up the hill a
Yeah,
little bit and be in the jungle or whatever, those
right.
sorts of things. And so it changes. But yeah, so more information is better. And so here we are in the information age, Joel, right?
Yes, we are.
We've got we've got all this data, and that's one of the things that superintendents have talked to me about is like, Dave, it's too much. Right now I'm doing clipping volume. Now I'm doing, we got the GS3 ball, we got we got
Yeah.
all this information, and I don't know how to deal with all this data. And over time here, a lot of good people are going to be working to show people more of a dashboard type thing and help
But
them make
what's
some
so cool
decisions.
about this is that it's really basic stuff. What you
It
guys are
is.
doing, and I love I read you're on your website. It's real simple. It says we map, we inform, you play.
Yeah.
It doesn't get a lot easier than that to me. And if if I'm a superintendent and I can get around the property and have every hot spot, mapped out so I can hand the map to one of the guys and say, here, this is where you're going right now. And just stand there with the hose on that spot. That's brilliant. And this as well as anybody. And I struggled with this when I was at Rutgers. Teaching a young guy how to water
Oh,
is almost
yeah.
impossible.
It was
But when you
hard for
show
me
them
to
data like this and then teach them how to water,
it was really hard for me to translate that. I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know. Armin used to say you can tell if somebody's going to get it in their first 5 minutes on the end of a hose,
yeah, I would think so.
just how they move and just how they, just
Yeah,
how it goes, right? And if they're
yeah,
watching the water go in and all that stuff. And for me, it was, I knew what my soil probe felt like in the morning,
yeah,
and I knew what it felt like at 2 in the afternoon, and I knew what I wanted, and it was virtually impossible to teach that. I couldn't quantify that for my guys. Some of them picked it up. Some of my section guys got it right away.
yeah,
One guy could do it with a screwdriver,
yeah.
right? And so when the TDRs came out, but that became a thing, I was like, good, finally this puts a number to some things,
Right.
and
Some
but
quantity.
I think the problem is, like the stimp meter, guys were comparing and they're saying, well, I keep my fairways at 20. Oh, I keep mine at 13, Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're one place is 20 and one place is 13 is probably the same reactivity on the ball, right? And here's what we're doing. We're trying to create a playing surface. It's not a museum,
Right.
it's a playing
Exactly.
surface. Right. So whatever that number is, whatever the TDR tells you it's supposed to be. And for greens and stuff, it was improving people's lives, helping them, you know, uh, show their guys how to water.
Yeah. Does
And
does the
yeah,
TurfRad eliminate the TDR, or at least put it on the shelf for a while?
it makes the TDR a different tool, Joel. I
Okay.
mean, eventually, I think TurfRad, when it's working for greens and stuff, that'll be a different deal. But the TDR still gives us salinity, and that's a big
Right. You
part
got
of things.
other information, yeah, which is important.
And it's still a double check for when somebody's out there, right away. I mean, one guy said to me the other day, he says, my guys don't hand water without having the TDR there, so they can, see the penetration,
Yeah.
those sorts of things. So I get it. But when you're talking about large areas, and look, if I'm gonna make a difference in irrigation water, if I'm gonna save water, if the irrigation, world comes to me and says, hey, you need to save, my water provider says you need to save 10% this year, or we're selling
Yeah.
you 10% less water, or some arbitrary guy sitting in the city hall says, we're going to tell golf courses to use less water, and they come up with some percentage, right?
And they just take their lunch away, half their lunch away. It's like
Right.
fell in.
And
It's
so where
it's
are
not.
you going to go for saving that? Well, you've got to go to your big areas,
Yeah.
right? You've got to go to your large area. You got to go to acreage, not square footage.
Yeah.
Greens and tees are not the place to save water necessarily.
No.
We
Or
want to be
approach it.
great with water. So so it's like, we've seen, we do an ROI calculator kind of where we take in people's water cost, power cost, all the things that kind of make their situation, because everybody has a different way that they get water, whatever it is, reclaimed water, not whatever.
Right.
And and something as little as 2.5% savings for some cases can make a gigantic, they make a 20+ thousand-dollar difference in a month.
I can imagine. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And we have people in the Western US paying $1 million a year for irrigation water, just the water, plus another 200 grand for power.
And that's today's numbers.
That's
10 years from now, it's going to be double that.
A superintendent I came up in the business with, one of the first guys that I worked for, told me one day, we were in Denver, and my water situation in Denver at that place was, deep wells, 1,400-foot wells and stuff. And he said to me, he said, you know what, when that guy in that house over there by the golf course can't take a shower, we're damn sure not going to be water in this golf course.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right. Which is why we weren't rushing at that particular place to put in a bunch of irrigation in the rough. People would say, what's wrong with the rough there? Because that place just, we just had fairway irrigation. It was a more municipal type place. And it's like, well, we don't have the water for that. We were already running out of water. In August, our wells were just sucking wind, and that's just, we couldn't keep the lakes full. In that situation. So let
me throw some of my passion at you on this. And when I first started talking to Kevin Hicks about what you're doing, the first thing that came to my mind, and my passion is soil biology, is having a system that takes this many many readings of a fairway. We'll just stay with a fairway, and you can eliminate these dry spots. Biology is not going to continue to survive when the soil dries out. So I look at this tool as a way, you and I, in the conversation we've been having, we've talked chemistry and physics. Let's go to the third leg and talk the biology. This process, by going out there to get, like you said, the TDRs or the POGOs are great tools, but you're not going to get the kind of data you're going to get from the TurfRad setup. And by understanding the entire moisture level of a property, you can continue to maintain soil biology at its peak, which is critical if we're going to have any kind of real reduction in thatch, in better nutrient mobility, and and water retention. We'll build humus. When I heard this whole story, I just my mind went right to, wow, what this can do for the biological leg of the three-legged stool, to me was exciting as hell. Does that make sense?
I'll give you a use case example right along those lines, Joel. There was a super that called me and said, hey Dave, can you look at my maps, because I'm having some trouble here. And there was a particular area in a fairway, right? And it was, no matter what he did, to turn up the times or whatever, it was still showing low compared to the areas around it. And he's like, man, I'm watering the snot out of this thing. And I said, okay, well, let's just go through the basics, So I had him go out and put some catch cans, let's make sure that your sprinklers are working right. Yeah. So we found a nozzle or two that wasn't performing the way it should, get those swapped out. Still some of the similar kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
And so we get on FaceTime, and this is where I love our tools now, because in the 1990s, I couldn't get on FaceTime with somebody.
No, you hardly had a cell phone, for God's sake.
So he's FaceTiming with me, and he's showing me how his soil probe won't go in the ground, and and it's it's chalky. The soil is kind of chalky and stuff. And I said, have you poked some holes here? Yeah, we've poked some holes. We've done some stuff, right? And so then my mind immediately goes to that humus idea, right? And so obviously this particular area isn't being very biological. Yeah. So I said, hey, let's try something. And we had looked at his soil test and stuff, so I knew a little bit about his chemistry. I said, why don't you get, a good compost? And we had him hunt a decent compost, right? And an organic fertilizer product that happened to be yours. You're right. Just full disclosure here.
Feed the soil, man.
And I said, I want you to get this much compost out in this area, and a little bit of the the 545 product, right? And just kick this thing off a little bit. And we put it down and then punched it in with with just a simple aerification tool, right? And they had already punched holes, so it wasn't like the holes were the thing, right? They'd already been out there punching this thing, and Well, as soon as the carbon kicked on, as soon as the biology kicked on, you could just see those areas, the receding, that area was turning to like it was with the other areas.
On your
right?
maps, is that what you're talking
On
about?
the
Your
maps.
maps were showing the
Maps
moisture
were
moving.
showing moisture being held, right? Because all of a sudden we've got some humus in the situation, a really good compost, a really good biological kickoff. I had him put a tiny bit of ammonium sulfate out there to start that whole process.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, I don't even understand what we just did, but I love it. And I'm like, great. This is so it's like, wetting agent wasn't working, just poking holes wasn't working. Well, let's do some soil biology here.
Yeah. And the nice thing about that scenario is that spot's going to be one of his best spots for a long time.
It might change.
And this is what we've seen forever. I mean, we don't have the data now that behind us like you would have with TurfRad, but when you get the biology kicking in, it stays. It's not like it's coming and going,
Right. It's well, remember what we've always said, investment agronomy.
Investment
right? It's
agronomy.
an investment.
Build the bank.
It's an investment. Yeah. So the agronomic old guard, whatever, they can laugh all they want at our granola management stuff.
It's not granola anymore. It's mainstream.
It's really not.
We've been doing it for 40 years.
And now we have tools that can quantify that a little bit more.
Yeah.
That can show the progress. And that's the thing is like, okay, superintendent sees some positive results in a positive way up top, right? But I want to see down below a little bit. That's going to predict my future.
Yeah, exactly.
That's going to predict my next couple of days, my next couple of weeks.
Yeah. But just having this mapping and information showing me moisture levels across the whole property, I'm going to know where I need to go focus. And again, with my passion of biology, I mean, I'm going to know if I don't have moisture in that area, I'm going to have localized dry spots. I'm going to have dead microbiology. I'm not going to get nutrient mobility. That grass is going to struggle. I'm not going to have checks and balances for pathogens.
Well, everything
that goes wrong.
What does your nitrogen do on a soil like that?
Right, exactly. Makes it worse. Yeah, exactly.
So I go through all this time of melting down some urea. I'm going to go pop the place a little bit for the ladies invitational. We go through all this and the sprayer goes across that particular area and the nitrogen says, damn, I'm gone in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
If the plant didn't get it, I'm gone. Flash, bang, and then what? Right. So it's, there's a huge reason to put the bacterial guys in play.
Yeah, exactly.
For that sort of thing.
And quite honestly, even if you do nothing but just keep the moisture levels consistent, you're going to maintain your soil biology. You might not need anything, but it's going to improve the biology exponentially just because they can't survive without moisture. We were Kevin and Hicks and I were at Acres a couple of weeks ago, and a number of talks and talking about building soils and how moisture is such a big part of that. You haven't been to Acres in a couple of years, and
I haven't. And
Kevin and I went. He and I are still talking about it. It's just so
good.
Enlightening, and they were talking about how they're truly building soils on their profiles, and they had an academic come in and say, well, you can't really build soils, and then the guy behind her is saying, well, I got 4 inches of soils I built in 3.5 years because I'm doing the right thing and making sure moisture can go through and getting some carbon. And but we talked with one of those biological meter folks, and the first thing that they said is it's imperative that we maintain a steady. It can't be wet and it can't be super dry. But biology wants is that sweet spot in the middle of wet and dry. And
there's no moisture. There's no life without carbon, and there's none without moisture.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't have water, how long do we live? A couple of days, maybe. You've heard me tell this story, but I've told the story, this is a story I've told 100 times now, but I had a student and I asked my class at Rutgers, how long can we go without water? Oh, a couple of days, 3 days. And I said, well, how long can we go without oxygen? And some guy in the back of the room raises his hand and says, I don't know, about a day. And it's so pertinent to what we're doing and what you're doing now. I mean, not only are you allowing moisture being even, but because you've got even moisture, you're going to have an even draw of oxygen.
Gases.
I'm assuming the gases. I mean, talk about that because that's got to be huge.
I think that's the part that a lot of people miss about why are we irrigating sometimes. I mean, the plant needs moisture, the soil needs moisture, and all that sort of stuff. But when it's again, through osmotic pressure, through adhesion, cohesion, we're pulling gases into the soil, right? Why do we vent greens?
Right.
Okay. So we're, part of the reason that we want to irrigate a soil, especially a sand-based type thing, a perched water table or whatever, is to pull gases into that,
Yeah.
into that root zone and
Mostly
change gases
oxygen.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so I don't know. It's just, to me, it's kind of a 101 kind of thing that I still see people kind of missing,
Yeah.
And I love, like, listen, I used to go to the Acres conferences, and it's like, golf people, who are you? You're not feeding the world. Get out of here.
Yeah. What are you here
but,
for?
but at the same time, like, we see friends like, Joel Salatin and stuff who are now being noticed.
Gabe Brown.
And, and of course, Jerry. And now, I heard the other day that Joel is probably going to have a place in the U.S. Department of Agriculture as an advisor.
It's very possible. He's on the short list. So is John Kemp.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm thinking
regenerative agriculture people talking, which, I'm thrilled. I mean, I think that's the greatest thing.
Do you remember when everybody was calling him crazy because of a chicken tractor?
Yeah.
Dude, you're nuts. You put your chickens in a big old cage and pull it around your fields. Why? That's a waste of time.
I mean, relative to what you're doing, he got one of his biggest criticisms because he was building soils. Farmers around his farm would accuse him of stealing water and irrigating when everybody was asleep because his property stayed green because he had moisture.
Because his animals had moisture.
He had humus. He had treated the soil correctly, and things were working the right way. And and Gabe Brown, who is now the big new rock star, who we hope to have on the podcast, actually, an old friend of Jerry's. Gabe is the star of Kiss the Ground, and he's got just a fascinating story. And I tell anybody that can listen is, get on Netflix and watch Kiss the Ground, and Common Ground is the sequel to that, and they're both fascinating. But they talk about this whole regenerative, I can build soils. And, Kevin and I leave Acres and we say, look, we know this is all farming, but this concept of building soils is certainly something we can transpose into the golf industry, and having manageable moisture across the board, a la TurfRad, I think could be a real player in this whole scenario. So,
well, and I think I've told you, Joel, and, as a reminder, my grandfather grew citrus in California and Arizona. My uncles, my cousins, they've all been involved with citrus, right? And they changed from a more conventional, type of farming. Although my grandfather, as it turns out, when we found a bunch of my grandfather's records and books and stuff, he hated the fertilizer guys.
No,
he really he thought that the petroleum
most people
product
do hate us.
He hated the fertilizer guys. But that's beyond the point. It's he just had his own ideas about how to, and he was doing avocados and stuff in areas where people said avocados wouldn't grow.
You can't
grow
and
lemons in Yuma, Arizona, which a lot of people said would never happen, and now it's one of the biggest citrus crops in Yuma. That was my grandfather. And my uncle brought the Israeli kind of watering drip system to Arizona.
Really? Oh, cool.
And he was on the Arizona State Ag Water Commission, for years and all that sort of stuff. And they switched to, they got away from some conventional things, especially on their cotton and some of because it wasn't just citrus there, potatoes, cotton, and built some soils. And they went through the same thing where the neighbors said, you guys are stealing water.
Yeah.
You must be. And then when they applied some of that, a simple thing like applying some calcium and getting their juice, what we call juice calcium up in the oranges, right? They would be to market 2 weeks early
with a better product.
And you know what happens when you go to market early in that world?
Yeah.
You win.
With a better product. Yeah. You make some money. It's funny. It's funny you say that, because in the Acres conference this year, one thing that, all these farmers were all saying the same thing about building soils, regenerative ag. But the one thing that they said that really struck home was they were making money for the first time. They're business people, right? So they're making money without subsidies. And what really struck me was that a lot of the family was coming back to the farm, young kids coming back and saying, well, this I can do. I mean, I don't want to raise, commercial hogs and all that stuff. But these are beautiful family farms that are diversified, a la Joel Salatin and Gabe Brown,
Yeah.
and they're just
Yeah.
and there's great hope and enthusiasm that you
Sorry
know.
about my dog.
Oh, that's all right. We love that. But yeah, it's really really very cool. And again, like I said, what you're doing now is it's just so cool to me that you got this thing,
Yeah.
the system that can measure that many points on a map. I mean, I can't imagine. Tell me some stories of guys that have been using it. Give me some testimonials, if you will. I know you
Well, I,
talked about John Riley and other folks.
my favorite one I think is Jim Pavinetti, because I love Jim and he's just one of the nicest guys I know. And he's just such a great, every time I talk to Jim, I'm just happy,
That's good. Yeah.
right. But part of that is he tells me about his Yankees tickets and,
Oh, good.
that is just, this whole thing. Right. But Jim says that he
Tell
has
everybody
learned,
where Jim is.
he's in Connecticut,
Yeah.
right on the line of Connecticut and New York, right at Fairview Country Club.
Fairview, yeah.
In Greenwich area, right? I don't know the exact town, but it's that.
Probably is
And
Greenwich.
Nice neighborhood.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, it's pretty nice.
Nice neighborhood.
Yeah, it's very nice.
And Jim tells me, he says, Dave, and we've used this, in the TurfRad universe a little bit and stuff. So I know he won't mind me saying this, but he said, I've learned more about my property in the last 3 months of using TurfRad than the 17 years that I've been here. And this is a guy that goes out and drives his golf course every morning.
Yeah.
Now he's got sensors on his golf cart and he goes and drives. Takes him an extra 45 minutes from what he used to do. So he's that guy, right? He's just, he's very just in touch with his property, kind of super. He has that kind of job. And
he's a data
staff.
guy, so I could see him really getting off on having that much data.
I mean, and it's like you hear something like that, and just me as a understanding the kind of golf course superintendent he is, and geez, my poor puppy. He's had enough of us talking. He's like, Dave, what else can I say? This is just a really good thing. And I'm thinking to myself, that's like one of the best things I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's a great story. What about the guys that aren't high, what we call high C's? I mean, the guys that are all data collectors. The guy that's just, I want to get it done. I mean, I can't imagine they wouldn't feel exactly the same way.
No, they do. And I guess the other testimonial is Lance Lauer at the Country Club of Castle Pines.
No, Lance.
Lance is a good guy.
Yep.
And it's his it's his shot. He's at a great place, and this is his, kind of first great. Well, he was at Ballyneal, so I don't, he's no stranger to great places, but he knows what has to be done there. Yeah. He knows what has to happen. And he starts telling me this story about when they started going out and scanning, they saw an area of the golf course that just didn't make sense. And then they saw some other areas that didn't make sense, that the computer wasn't saying what the TurfRad was saying,
Oh, really?
So who's right and who's wrong? So it turns out that his his hydraulic tree and his computer was all jacked up. Pardon me. And so they had to fix the hydraulic tree, and they have kind of a tough situation there anyway, where there's a lot of elevation change. It's hilly, and so they redid their hydraulic tree, big change, right? And you could see it in the scans. So that's good, but there was still some stuff. So we went out and checked a little bit more, and it turns out there was a ton of nozzle problems. And they ended up pretty much re-nozzling the entire golf course.
Oh, wow. All because of your data.
All because it's like, this is not lining up with what the computer says should be happening. And now we fix the hydraulic tree. It's still not right. And we know we have some pressure problems, but still. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, it turns out that his individual head performance was really bad.
How would this work? I mean, just as sake of argument, I got a property, relatively new, maybe the irrigation system is really tweaked fine. It's working. How does this help when I really don't have irrigation problems?
So that's great, Joel, because a lot of times, what superintendents think is, and I remember Kevin Hicks and I working on this a long time ago when he was in Boise, is uniformity, right?
Yeah.
DU, right? Distribution uniformity.
Mm-hmm.
At best, in your very best designed irrigation system is going to be, maybe 70.
Yeah, maybe okay. Yeah, maybe
good.
Yeah.
And I tell people, if you went out with a sprayer, if you went out with a spreader and your guy was 70% good, you'd murder him.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? So everybody thinks that we have this real, uniform kind of thing. Well, the terrain is different. The pressures are different. There's all
the
these
soil
things.
is different from spot to spot. So you got
Soil's
all
different
sorts
from
of
all of those things. So, so even in a new situation, best situation, you're still going to have those uniformity things. And what we know about DU is that DU does not get fixed by turning up the times.
Right.
If I have a uniformity issue, turning up the time doesn't help.
Right.
We may need to go stab another head in. We may need to move a head. We may need to re-nozzle, for that particular soil type, for that particular area or whatever. And this is how you learn.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't have any problem putting out catch cans and figuring it out. We just did that at night, and it was some extra work, putting out the pie pans, or and then the wind will blow them over, and then we got some nicer catch cans that stabbed into the ground and stuff. And a lot of people don't want to go through that kind of basic irrigation.
Yeah, think of the time you're saving them by just running over with a sensor.
Yeah. So those kind of things. I mean,
so what's the typical application? Are you running this every day? Are you collecting data on the same site every day and comparing it? I mean, what's the practical application of TurfRad?
The practical application is daily or every other day scans.
Okay.
And the scans are, the data is available within 30 minutes after the guys get back to the shop.
Can I assume that the data is not changing radically day to day unless weather changes or you don't? So weather that's where I was kind of going with this, Dave, is that so the weather impact has as much as an impact as soil type or environment or trees or so there are a lot of moving parts here that this really kind of keeps you. Everything, you want to get away from the roller coaster, and this puts you right on that even key.
I think what we've really seen is like for special events and stuff, tournament type things and all that.
Yeah.
One of our guys, really wanted to dry down for his big, member guest.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, now I can manage my dry down. I can see how far I can take it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Hadn't thought of that.
We might have been running along at 22%, thinking that's pretty good. But now I'd like my golf course to be 13. But is that too far?
Yeah.
And what do I need to do? What do I need to adjust to get to that 13? Is that skipping water for a couple of nights and then coming back to it? Or is it gradual takedown? Every place is going to be different.
And that 13 is arbitrary, right? I mean, if some guy says, well, I want to be at 13, but what supports the 13?
So
now you have a support.
If he goes out and says, this is what I want, this is exactly what I want, and you go back and look at the map and the map says this, whatever that number is, then we can recalibrate to that number and go from there.
Right, so let me get to some business notes here. Can I afford this?
Can you afford this?
As a superintendent, can I afford TurfRad?
So the sensors themselves are $6,000 in the current version. 2 to 3 sensors is kind of the deal, and then its software is an applied, kind of thing. So the software, the number crunching is right now $8,000 a year.
Okay.
So
I got a small capital investment, and I've got
you have a small capital investment at first, and then a yearly cost, and that yearly cost is never going to change because the data has to, But that $8,000 doesn't matter if you have 1 sensor or 5.
Right.
That's what it costs to serve the data, and that's where things are going now. We're looking at maybe that may change because the world is changing. Elon may put up better satellites. Who knows? And I'm so sorry about my puppy. I have a new puppy, and he's.
Oh, I love it. I think it's great. We love families.
Cage for a little bit, but anyway, so that's the business.
Why 3 sensors? Why would I want 3 sensors?
Well, I think you want to have, even if you have 2 fairway mowers, that's good enough.
Okay.
Some people want 3 because they want to throw 1 on a cart to go do their surrounds, and some places the fairway mowers don't go.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but even 2 sensors, right? So you're looking at 12 grand for sensors and an $8,000 a year for the thing. And in a lot of people's water situation, if you save 2.5-5% water, that pays for itself in about a year.
Yeah. That's a no-brainer in that.
In one of our situations, the guy paid for his sensors in the first 2 months.
Wow.
Because of what his water cost and his power cost is. So, and I hate talking about the numbers. Everybody's got to have a different.
That's going to be the first question you're going to get.
That's what everybody's going to ask. And I love that. Yeah, because then we just want to show you what your particular ROI is going to be.
That's exactly right. I was just going to say that. It's all about the ROI.
Yeah. It doesn't, the hardware costs what it costs, and it's a little bit cutting edge. And, we have programmers and, we've got R&D, and we've got to make sure that we cover those things. It's a business.
Do you do trials with superintendents? Would you give them?
Yeah.
So you can go out and show them what they're doing, show them the data.
In the US, through the Task Tracker group, we have some demo sensors that are floating around. And if they really want to demo and they want to see that happen, we'll do that for them. It takes a little bit of time for us. We'll build their maps, and they can go scan for a couple weeks and see how that works for them.
How do they find you?
They can go to turfrad.com.
That's pretty simple.
Yeah, and there's contact information there. There's a web form to fill out if you're interested in talking to us, and you get on the Zoom call with myself or with one of the Task Tracker guys, usually myself first. And,
perfect.
And we talk through your situation, and I show you the quote unquote pitch deck, about here's the technology, here's how it works, and that sort of thing.
And you will be at the GIS.
Yeah.
So you guys will have a booth. You'll show that the equipment will be there.
We'll be with the Task Tracker guys. We'll have one.
Oh, that's what you'll be in the Task Tracker booth. Is that where you'll be?
Because they're our U.S. distributor.
Okay, perfect. So if you're looking for Dave and TurfRad, go find the Task Tracker booth at the show, and I'm sure you're going to be hammered, dude.
And then the last thing, Joel, that I can't really talk about too much, but I'm gonna veil this a little bit, is that we're working on some integration with one of the irrigation companies, and so you will have to see what we'll have a couple of our chief guys working with that particular irrigation.
That's very cool. I'm excited.
I'm being really careful. I probably already said too much, but we've done some special work.
Nobody listens to the end of the podcast anyway.
Right. Nobody got this far anyway.
They fall off. So,
plus that guy's dog's barking. What the hell's wrong?
Yeah. So how old is the puppy?
He is 14 weeks this week.
Wow. What is he?
And he's the great combination of Chinese Shar-Pei, Pit Bull, and Australian Cattle Dog.
And what's his name?
His name is Walter.
That's a great name.
Named after Walter Woods.
Of course. I was going to say that. I knew you well enough to know that that's where that came from.
Yeah. He also has the Shar-Pei wrinkles, so we call him Walter Wrinkles around here.
Walter Wrinkles. That's great.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, but my big pit bull, Bruce, who was my buddy and who a lot of people knew about, passed away.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry.
A couple months ago, and so I had to fill the void.
Yep.
Yeah.
In his honor, if nothing else, right?
And he's a grand pain in the ass right now, but I love him.
He sounds like he's a grand pain in the ass.
He's awesome. Actually, he's super smart, and he's doing good. And of course, I know everybody thinks their kid is the smartest kid.
Of course,
but I love him.
Yeah.
So
my father thought that. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Dave, I can't thank you enough. You're one of my dearest friends. You've helped me immensely. I can never thank you enough for a career that I'm grateful for, and it kind of got a kickoff from you. And I hope and expect that you will join us at the GIS at our big bash at the House.
Are you guys doing booth podcasts this year too?
We're going to probably do a proper podcast on their platform, but Mike Small's coming with us, and we're going to be doing some interviews on the floor with levelers and other things. So we're going to try to do a little bit more of that. But again, on Tuesday night at 6 till 9, we're going to be at the House of Blues. So any friend of EarthWorks is a friend of ours. So come on over and hopefully you'll be there for.
I got my invite.
I'm expecting you to be there. So if for no other reason, come by and see Dave Wilber and talk TurfRad. It would be a lot of fun, or dogs or puppies or whatever else you want to talk about.
Don't expect too much. No, I'm kidding. I just listen. I love and I hate the GIS, right? Because I want to talk to everybody and I can't talk to everybody.
I know it's very frustrating.
But Joel, I just want to tell you, you have been a great friend and a great help to me in some of my darkest times and some of my lightest times, and so I'm glad to show you my smile right now.
Let's hope the light stays strong for you, Dave.
Yeah,
I wish that for you for the rest of the days.
We've had a fantastic relationship, and you were one of the people that I was missing as I was pulling away from turf, and so it's good to be around.
Well, we pulled you into the podcast as much as we possibly can.
You did, I know.
Without being rude, but And we
Yeah,
would love
well,
to have you back. I mean, like I said when we started this thing, you've been one of our biggest sellers here on the EarthWorks
shocking.
podcast. So I
That's
want to
just
hear about.
shocking
I
to me.
mean, I want to. I'm so excited about what you're doing. I want to hear about some more of the testimonials. 4 months, 6 months, 12 months down the road. So
Yeah,
I
there's
just
a
think
lot
this
of
is a
work.
cool
There's a
thing.
lot of work to do. There's a lot of
I
R&D.
bet.
There's that's the cool thing about a startup is it's kind of all hands on deck. And these guys are they're young and they're cool and they're smart and I got referred to as the grandfather the other day, which nearly made me choke on my tongue.
Yeah, we hate that now, don't we?
You
I still
know,
have hair and I get called that. I
but
don't
at
get
the
it.
same time, it's like wow, that's pretty cool. So it's progressive of them to
Well,
to
you
include
come with
some
a
TurfRads.
wealth of information. So why would they wouldn't want to use that? It would be beyond me. But I'm thrilled for you, my friend, and I look forward to seeing you in San Diego in a few
Okay,
weeks.
Joel.
And we'll definitely catch up, break bread, and have a chance to
Yeah,
give
thanks
each
for
other a
having
big
me.
hug. Appreciate it, man.
All right, dude.
And if you are not a subscriber to the EarthWorks podcast, please do so we can tell you who's up next when we know it. And we get to show you some cool things. So thank you, everybody, for listening. And Dave, thank you so much. We'll see everybody next week.